Hey there, folks. Welcome, everyone. Gathered by the fire. Thanks for being here tonight. My name is Megan Wynn, and I'm the Community Events Manager at the Peninsula Open Space Trust, and I'll be your host for tonight. You're watching Camping with Kids, hosted by Post and the Bay Area Lyme Foundation. It's time to gear up for the ultimate family campout. There's nothing like trading screen time for green time and enjoying a night under the stars with your little loved ones. But bringing kids along and pets adds both joys and challenges, and it's important to show up prepared. Whether you're a seasoned overnight adventurer or a first time camper, this online event is your guiding compass to ensure that your kids are safe and happy campers. Tonight's 60-minute presentation will be interactive and we welcome your participation. You'll need to log into YouTube to ask your questions in the live chat, and we will take your questions throughout the presentation and at the end. And here's a pro tip. You can watch directly on YouTube or click full screen if you're watching on the Post website for the best viewing experience. For those of you who are new to Post's work, we are a nonprofit land trust, and our mission is to protect open spaces on the peninsula and South Bay for the benefit of all. We are creating a network of protected lands where people and nature connect and thrive. Since 1977, Post has protected over 87,000 acres of land. You can learn more about Post on our website at openspacetrust.org. And we host many free events every month, as well as share free resources like our hiking guides if you're looking for recommendations on where to go hiking in the South Bay and Peninsula. And we'll also share later on in this program about the best camping spots too. Before we dive into the program, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement and invite you to share what native land you are currently occupying and tuning in from today. The land in Post's working area includes the territories of the Amamutsin, the Muwekma Ohlone, Ramaytush-Ohlone, Tamya Nation, as well as other Native organizations and individuals who are descended from the first people of this land. These lands have been home to many Native tribes since time immemorial, and whose people are still here with us today. I want to acknowledge the land itself, including the Santa Cruz and Diablo Mountains, the San Francisco Bay, and the Pacific Ocean, as well as the watersheds and ecosystems that make up this landscape we call our home. And I'm seeing folks in the chat slowly coming in. Whenever you have a chance, we welcome your participation. All right. So thank you for sharing, and I hope this moment can serve as a reminder that as residents of these places, we have a responsibility to be caretakers of our shared home and neighbors, including wildlife. And so I'd like to know who's in the audience tonight, and I have a fun interactive activity for those joining live. And here's how this is going to work and how you can participate. You'll need to log in using your phone and scan this code, as you can see. So take your phone, scan that code, or you can log in at menti.com and use that code at the very top to log in and participate in this interactive activity. This will just help gauge where our audience is coming from so we can help cater our program for tonight's audience. And if you're watching the recording, you can go ahead and participate as well. All right. So I see a few folks in there. I'm going to give you a few more times. But if you don't want to log in, that's okay. Feel free to use the chat to write your answers as well. All right. I see a few more folks jumping in. So you can enter at any time, but for the sake of time, I'm going to start the program and then you can join in anytime. All right. So first question is, where are you calling in from today? Go ahead and drop a pin on the chat so we can start seeing where you are calling in from. All right. I see a bunch from the San Mateo area. We got some folks in the East Bay, a lot of folks in the San Jose area and South Bay. Excellent. So everyone is pretty local and nearby, and it's good to see that we have a wide variety of folks calling in from today. Great. Okay, and then in the chat, I see we have someone from SF as well. Keep on coming in. Even some people farther off in the range. Great. Good to see you all and welcome. Okay, next slide. Here we go. On a scale of 1 to 5, can you rate how much experience you have with camping? 1 being no experience and 5 being you're a total expert. Let's see where you all fall. Okay, the scales are tipping. We got a lot of people in the range here. All right, mostly beginners, the ones and twos. Excellent. That means you're in the right place because tonight's program is going to be geared a lot towards beginners. In the chat, we got some threes, we got some ones, we got some zeros. You are so valid here as well, even if you're a 0, 1, 2, or 3. And we have someone who is a 5. Okay, great. I'd love to know if you get some other useful information and can share some of the resources that we have as well. So it's going to be a program that's ready for everybody. Okay, thanks. I think we have a good ride here, but I think it's around somewhere in the middle, and I will make sure our speaker will know where everybody's coming from. Okay, next question here. All right. Can you tell us what are you excited to learn about the most tonight? You can select up to 3. Anywhere from you're looking about camping spots, how to make a reservation, what to pack, what to cook and eat. You're worried about safety, hygiene, or any activities. Go ahead and drop those in the Mentimeter activity on your phone. Okay, let's see. It's all coming in live. We got camping spots. Definitely, we'll go over that for sure. What to pack? Yes, we'll definitely talk about gear lists. We have a sample menu on cooking and eating. Safety, we'll definitely talk about that, as our speaker tonight is with the Bay Area Lyme Foundation. So they're all about safety, especially tick safety. So we'll cover all of that. Okay, this is a good variety. Good to know. So we got mostly camping spots, cooking, food, safety, activities, and packing. And then if we have time, we'll cover how to make reservations, and hygiene is a little bit a part of it too. Okay, and then keep typing in the chat as well. I'm looking as well. Okay, and last question we have here. What are you hesitant or fearful about when it comes to camping? You can select up to 3. So is it about the wild bugs and animals, or is it about getting lost or hurt? Maybe it's about pooping outside, which is a real thing. Building a fire, not sleeping well, not having the right gear, being cold, or being bored, or having your kids being bored, or forgetting something. Or if you clicked other, I'd be curious to know what that is, and if you want to put that in the chat so we can reference that. Okay, we got a huge mix here. All right, let's see what we got. So I'm seeing folks are worried about wildlife, worried about being uncomfortable and cold outside, forgetting something. Yeah, that's super real. Let's see. All right, yeah, someone getting eaten by bugs and not being able to communicate is a big concern of mine. Someone in the chat says, yeah, that's super real. All right, we'll take notes to make sure our speaker knows. She's listening right now, so we'll be sure to ensure we get through all these points. Okay, thanks everybody for participating. That's all for the interactive activity. You can go ahead and close your phones now and come back to the main screen where we'll continue the rest of the show here. So that is wonderful. I'm really appreciative of everyone participating. Let's get this show started, and I'm excited to introduce you to our speaker tonight. Jo Ellis is the Director of Education at the Bay Area Lyme Foundation. Originally from the UK, Jo grew up on the edge of the Peak District National Park and spent most of her childhood in and around nature and animals. Jo loves California wild landscapes and raised her 3 children hiking, camping, kayaking, and exploring at every opportunity. She organized and led many camping experiences and made sure everybody is safe. Both as a teacher and as a parent, she has experience working to ensure safety and everyone's having a good and happy, fun time. Retired from the classroom, Jo now works for the Bay Area Lyme Foundation and helps get the word out about tick-borne illnesses through education. And we are so excited to have Jo back again on the show as our guest speaker. Let's welcome Jo to camp. Hey, Jo.
Hey, Megan. Oh my gosh, what a beautiful evening. I had to hike so far to get here.
It's so good to see you. I hope you found our campsite okay.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I just want to warm myself by the fire and make myself some s'mores and just enjoy this wonderful California landscape and gorgeous nature that we have here.
Yeah, we've just been sitting cozy by this fire behind me over here, waiting for you to tell us amazing stories and advice. And by the way, did you see that owl on the way here?
No, I didn't see him. Which way? Which way?
Well,
Over here?
make sure you get a good look at it while on your
All
way
right.
out.
Okay, I will for sure.
All right, well, you're getting settled in after your long journey to camp. I'll introduce you a little bit to our speakers. So, for those of you who don't know Jo, we did a webinar earlier last year on TikTok science and safety. So, audience members, if you didn't get a chance to watch this one, we dropped a link in the chat. We'll email it to you as well. But that webinar goes over a lot about tick safety, specifically on how to identify that and prevent Lyme disease. So make sure you get the chance to see that. But Jo, can you tell us about how you got into camping and what brings you joy when you're outside?
Well, like in the intro that you gave about me, yes, I grew up in the UK, but although I spent a ton of time outside hiking and dog walking and horseback riding, things like that, I never ever camped. I never spent a single night in a tent until I moved to California. And I never really camped until I was about 42. And I just completely fell in love with it. And I think it really is the ultimate family vacation. And we're just going to talk about all those things to make it a successful family vacation this evening.
Thanks, Jo. I resonate with that story. I did not grow up camping with my family either. And it wasn't until I went on school programs that really taught me. And so I'm excited that we're able to bring this program so that more families today can go outside safely and have a lot of fun. Can you tell us a little bit about what you'll talk about today specifically?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the benefits of camping. We're going to talk about how to plan. We're going to talk about gear. We're going to talk about food prep. We're going to talk about safety and hygiene. And we're also going to talk about fun, which is really the most important thing of all.
All right. Well, I can't wait to hear about that. So, Jo, before you get started, a reminder to our live audience, if you'd like to ask a question, you'll need to log into YouTube to participate in the chat. We're going to answer your questions as we go throughout the presentation, as well as at the end. All right, Jo, let's get your slides up. Make sure those are looking good. All right. Take it away.
Okay. All right. So the big real message here is you can do this. If you haven't done it before, or maybe you've done it before and it wasn't so great, we're really going to dive into some of these topics. And as we covered in the intro, talk about, all of these different aspects of organizing a really great family camping trip. Okay. So the big thing is we're all spending tons of time on screens. And kids, particularly school-age kids, are not just for doing it for homework, but for recreation. And if you look at some of these statistics, using screens for entertainment for an average of 4.5, almost 5 hours a day. And then once your kids get into middle and high school, it's even more, mostly because a lot of that's homework related. But camping and being out in nature is a really great way to be able to get your kids off screens and get them out enjoying the natural world. And we know from studies that have been done that being out in nature really does give your brains a boost, not just your kids, but adult brains too. It really gives you that incredible feeling of flow, increases activity. I'm sure you've heard about, forest bathing, that kind of concept. And also it gives you that connection to nature away from stress. But camping, I think more than anything else, really helps build self-reliance and independence in children, particularly school-age children, like elementary school-age kids, because it gives them that sense of agency, which sometimes they can really crave. So the planning timeline really is starting like right now. We're here in California. A lot of campsites get released about 6 months ahead. You can do a ton of stuff through online booking. There are all kinds of different types of parks available, which might be a surprise to some of you if you haven't been camping before. You've got state parks, county parks, regional parks. And I think when you have young kids, you really need to be realistic about distance and travel time. And what's wonderful is here in the Bay Area, we just have so many beautiful and incredible campsite options that no matter whether you're in the North Bay, East Bay, or South Bay, you're really going to be able to find a campsite close to your home. Also, you know, depending on your family situation, it's important to check amenities at each site and each campground because they do vary. So, for example, some campgrounds are sort of more primitive and have what we call vault toilets and may not have showers, whereas the more sophisticated campgrounds will have accessible bathrooms, accessible campsites, coin-operated showers, flush toilets, etc. So a lot of that stuff you can really find out by just getting online and Googling around.
Can I say something real quick, Jo, about that past slide?
Yeah.
The reason why we're talking about camping with kids in February is really this like planning timeline, 6-month window, what you just mentioned. It's February, it's cold outside, it's wet. The last thing on your mind might be camping in the summertime. But because these spots tend to fill up quickly, we want everyone to get ahead of the curve, get prepared now so that everyone can enjoy a camping filled summer. So
absolutely. And we're right in that window right now for like the July, August timeline. So yeah, there's a campground that I love to go to up in the Sierras, and I already have an alert set because they're going to release the campsites that I want to book on the 12th of February. And I've set my alarm for 5:45 a.m. So that's what it kind of takes. So now is a really good time to actually do that research. The great thing about California, one of the things that we know from our relationship with Post, is all these incredible, the variety of landscapes and topography that we have in California is, I believe, unmatched. And so depending, again, on what your preference is, you've got really the absolute pick of the kinds of landscapes that you know your family will be interested in. You can actually camp on beaches in California, and right, you know, on the edges of lakes and rivers, and it's just so beautiful. The other thing is, I think when you're thinking about family camping, and you know your own families, and you know like what kind of situations they're going to be comfortable in. Today, we're not going to talk about backpacking. That's really like off the table for this evening. However, as your kids get older, I'm sure that some people here have done backpacking, but really we're talking about car or van, tent camping. You can do a combination of car and van and tents. Here you can see there are tent cabins that you can rent, and these are dotted around in different campgrounds around the state. Then you have actual cabins that are like proper, like permanent structure. And if that's not your jam, then, you know, you could look at trailer or RV type camping, and you can rent trailers and RVs. So these are the different kinds of camping opportunities that are available. And just going back to what Megan said, we're right in the window right now for all of our local parks. And usually finding your campsite, you're going to be wanting to look about 6 months ahead. And there are so many sites available. So just the California state parks alone, there's 15,000 campsites just through Cal State Parks. And then you've got all of these other regional and county parks available too. And a lot of these campgrounds can be booked through one main site, which is called reserveamerica.com. But there are other different online platforms as well, which we will talk about. We have a slide on that too. Okay. And I know it's a little confusing to start with, but really, if you start to just look and Google around and find the parks, each of these parks they'll make it very explicit as to which platform you do your booking through. Okay. So the reason why we say you need to start looking now is because you want to be able to plan. And I think that with school-age children, it's a really good idea to kind of limit your drive to about 2 and 2.5 hours. And why is that? After many years of experience and camping with up to 40 kids and then my own 3 kids, I always had the thing where I was like, we're leaving home around 10, we'll stop for lunch on the way, we'll get to the campsites because the campsites are ready for you to show up and pitch your tent and get organized around about 2 o'clock. Daylight is your friend. I don't know about anybody online today, but I really don't particularly like putting up a tent in the dark, even if it's a tent I know really well. And so you need that like couple of hours just to get organized, and then you've got some time to explore and orient yourself. So it's a really nice time. Then you've got your eating time, you can clean up from dinner, and then get the kids to bed at a relatively normal time. So here are some campgrounds to check out. And Megan and I, we talked about this, when we were planning this event. And some of these were on the maps that Megan showed at the beginning. And you can see that, again, I talked about Reserve America, but you've also got reservecalifornia.com. And so these campgrounds are all really within very local to the San Francisco Bay Area. So you've got Chabot, Mount Diablo, Portola Redwoods, Henry Cowell. And there are some county parks that actually handle their own reservation platforms, like Joseph D. Grant Park down in the South Bay. So carve out the time to do some research. It will really pay you dividends later. Okay.
Yeah, and we'll send some resources at the end of this program with the links on where to find reservations and a link on all the packing lists. So you'll see that, and I'll review it at the end again and show the maps. So
yeah,
don't worry if you are furiously taking notes. We will review it one more time.
Yeah. And so one of the things that we talked about when we were planning this is it can be kind of overwhelming if you've never camped before, if you start like going online and looking at the cost of gear. And we totally understand that. And so there are lots of different places where you can try to get gear for free or at very low cost. You can consider renting for the first time if you've never camped before. That's a very sort of like low risk investment if you're not sure that you or your kids are really going to enjoy this. Do you have friends that you can borrow items from? If you stay close to home, as we've suggested with these particular campgrounds, that's going to keep the transportation costs low as gas is expensive. You should really budget in the range of somewhere between $35 and $45 a night for the camping fees for the site. And I really don't recommend you spend any money on any kind of special games and toys for the trip. In my experience, once you've got your campground set up and your kids are exploring, they're actually kind of busy for the day. So, you don't really have to go overboard in that respect and spend a lot of money. And you can keep your food menus really simple and just more or less raid your pantry for things that you've already got. And I would suggest that for your first time camping, that you really just limit it to a couple of nights, like a Friday night, Saturday night, come home Sunday. I really believe in baby steps with most things. It's just, you do it, you try it, you kind of develop your confidence over time. And also you develop your children's confidence and sense of reliance during these situations, but always pack cash for extras like parking and any kind of emergency. Okay.
Yeah, and things can just be really simple, right? You don't need the fancy gear, you don't need the brand name things. You just need things to work and get you through that weekend, right, Jo?
Yeah, exactly. So here are some things. If you don't have a lot of gear, it's a good idea to actually start being on the hunt like now. And here are some of the places to score these key items like tents, sleeping bags, folding chairs, a stove. You definitely want a large cooler and kitchen utensils if you don't want to like pack up your own kitchen. There's great buy nothing Facebook groups where people are always giving things away, and you can actually put requests out and say, hey, does anybody have an old cooler, an old camping stove? Next door is a great place. Free Cycle. When my kids were little, I was always combing through Goodwill to see if I could find old pots and pans for $2 or $3 that I would throw in my camping bin. And obviously, REI often has used gear sales. Keep an eye out for that. And also, as we mentioned before, you can rent stuff. Okay.
Yeah, someone in our audience just mentioned Sports
Yeah,
Basement is also another place that offers cheap rentals that are pretty affordable, in addition to REI. So
absolutely.
renting,
Yeah,
even
great
borrowing
tip.
from friends.
Yeah, borrowing from friends. Although sometimes you have to, if you borrow gear from friends, you have to be very, very, very good about returning it in good condition.
Very
Mm,
true.
yeah,
I feel
you
like
really
that should be a principle for anywhere you
It
borrow gear.
it is, but tents can be tricky when you're like cleaning them and putting them away for the first time. You've got to be really particular about that. And also, obviously, garage sales. That's also a great way to find stuff. I'm a big fan of Rubbermaid tubs. And what I would do when my kids were little is I would start actually just throwing things into crates. Ziploc bags are your friend. You can really store all kinds of stuff in there and keep things in little categories. I used to save takeout meal utensils and condiments. And as I mentioned, picking up cheap pots and pans because you don't want to be taking away out your fancy, maybe your all-clad or Le Creuset type stuff to the camping situation. So one of the things that I'm a big believer in is doing a dry run. And this is a great way of being able to really go check out a campground closer to home. And you can actually scope out some of the sites and see which ones are close to the bathroom. And even though there are all these maps and things online, I think until you're familiar with them, it's really hard to imagine what the campgrounds are like until you see them. So it's good just to do kind of a drive through. Also, when you're looking at sites, think about how important shade might be to your family at certain times of year, because I know some people are a lot more temperature sensitive. And kids, especially those with special needs, they really do better with, oops, something just happened. Limited surprises. So I'm a big believer in dialing down surprises if you can. And it really will help you with your planning and anticipating how you're going to set things up. And you can pack a picnic and just go and take a picnic at the campground and talk to the kids and say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Okay. The other thing is that if you have anyone in your family who needs accessibility, all of the information about accessibility is always on the online booking platform for the campgrounds, and they will indicate at the point of booking which are the ADA campsites, and they are terrific, and they really provide you with all of these additional amenities. Okay. And you can camp with pets. That black dog right here on the top picture, that's my grand dog. And that was recently when he went camping with my son. But please be really respectful of the rules around camping. And you need to leash pick up after your pet always. They do enforce the laws in the campground. The rangers will come around and check. Dogs are not allowed on all trails in campgrounds. You'll see online or when you get there which trails are available to your dogs. You also need to be mindful of food, snacks, and meds for your dogs. And make sure that, if they're reactive to other dogs and pets, that might be a situation where you might want to think about whether you should take your dog or not. And just like with kids, don't forget to tick check, because your dogs can pick up ticks too. So when you're checking for ticks every night with your kids before you put them snugly away in their sleeping bags, you also need to be checking with your dogs too. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Jo, for bringing up the policy about dogs in these open spaces and county parks. It's important because we share these places with wildlife, and there are certain rules placed to protect wildlife, and that's why. So sometimes there's mountain lions in the areas, or there's birds that can either be threatened species or just like birds that just naturally live in that area, and we don't want to disturb the wildlife. And so that's the reason why there are laws against having pets allowed on certain trails or not. So that's the reason why, and we should always check the rules before we go to the campsites.
Yeah. And you can never, ever leave your dog unattended at a campsite, either in a tent or in a car. That will really get the rangers going. So don't think that you can go off and have a hike and just leave your dog unattended, okay? And yes, as I mentioned before, make sure your dogs are really up on their flea and tick medication before you take them camping. And you should be on top of that anyway as a responsible pet owner.
Quick
Okay.
question, Jo, from our audience. How do we prevent ticks from getting to pets and kids?
Well, we're going to cover that later. So
All right.
stay tuned because we've got a whole section about that coming up. So let's talk about menu planning, because certainly when I started out camping with my kids, I really was sort of overwhelmed by the whole menu planning thing. But the great thing is that you know, you can really keep it super simple. I'm a big believer in one pot meals, and I think somebody mentioned that earlier in the chat. And we actually have a downloadable meal planning, meal plan for you guys that you can get after this presentation. But I'm just going to race through this real quick. But breakfast, keep it simple. These are things that you can just prep with hot water, cereal, bagels. Lunches, just make it sandwiches, fruit, snacks along the way, chips, cookies, fruit, you know, bars. And then dinners, just super, super simple stuff like pasta with sauce, quesadillas and wraps. And just don't overthink it, because for a couple of nights, you know, you don't have to go gourmet. It's just really about making sure that when you put your children to bed, that their stomachs are full, and yourself, because it's just a lot simpler that way. Sometimes what I've done in the past is I've actually made like a pot of chili and then just thrown it in the cooler. And then when I've got to the campsite, I've just reheated it for the first night. So that's the first night's meal done. And then you've only really got the second night, and that could just be pasta and sauce and some Parmesan cheese or something like that. Super easy. Okay, so that one pot meal is the way to go. Okay.
Now, Jo, are you cooking this on the fire, or are you cooking it on a stove? Like I see that picture that you had before there.
Yeah. I typically would use a stove to cook, and also while you're eating, whatever I always had an extra big pot that I would fill with water, and while we're eating, I would have that heating on the stove so that by the time we were done eating, that water was ready for cleanup. But yeah, I can cook over the fire, but it took me a while to really gain the confidence to do that. I'm now able to like do steaks and chicken and, you know, like campfire pizza and all kinds of fancy things. But I think when you're starting out, you just need to keep it super simple. Yeah.
Thank you.
Also, you know, I mean, let's face it, really, what is the fire for?
Absolutely.
That's all we care about. I'm a big believer in a family meeting, especially if we've got school-age kids, whether they're readers or not. You can get them to do their own packing. Really talk to them about expectations. You know, if you haven't camped before, I think it's really important to share that with your kids and just like bring them into the fact that you're learning too. It's an adventure for everybody. Talk about what it's going to be like. Will there be water, beach, hiking, fishing? I mean, all those things are going to really dictate what you're going to pack. And give the kids a space for ideas and input. Have them make a packing list, or if you know they can't, then do something simple like this that's going to really help them feel that they're invested, they're included in this. And I always used to get my kids to pack their own bags at least a couple of nights ahead so that I could go into their rooms when they were asleep and I could open the bags up and check and see what kind of like naughty things and contraband, like Legos, that they packed. And I'd be like, we're not taking Legos because if we lose the pieces, someone's going to have a meltdown. So, and ask them what they want to eat, you know, and what everybody can agree on, because, you know, if you have a hungry child, you're going to have a miserable child, and then everyone's going to be miserable. Okay. All right. So when you get to your campsite, it's very important that you locate and that you stay in your assigned site, that you don't go, oh, I kind of like the site next door better, because these are all assigned. There's numbers on them. Your name is attached to them if you've booked ahead, and you don't want to be upsetting the campground host or the park rangers by messing around. and find a flat or flattish spot for your tents. It's a good idea to kind of sweep the area so people aren't sleeping on lumps and bumps and pine cones and rocks and things like that. And learn your campsite amenities. You've got your fire pit, and you've got a picnic table. You're going to have a food locker. That's what that big brown box is over there. Anything that is non-perishable should go in the food locker or be locked in your car. And you can go find the coin-op showers and the flush toilets. And those are pretty typical. So make sure you check, because it will tell you. And also, most campsites are very close to a spigot. You can see there's a spigot there, that round thing that's sticking up in the middle of the slide. And it's always potable water at these campgrounds, unless otherwise indicated. So you can drink it. It's safe to cook with. No worries. California is an amazing place to camp. Let me tell you, I always think it's like the Ritz-Carlton of camping here. For real.
Can you talk a little bit about the food lockers, also sometimes known as bear lockers? Why is it important for us to put our food there overnight or when we're not using it? What if there's no bears? Do I still use it?
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea to still use it, because what you're trying to do is be as light on the land as possible. We're there, we want to be respectful. And the problem is that if you have food available, even when you pull food out and you're cooking, you're going to notice that you've got chipmunks that start to arrive. You'll have Stella's jays, this bird here. They'll start calling all their neighbors, and they will actually come up onto your picnic table and start like stealing like bits of bread and cheese and crackers and things like that. So what you want to be doing is really, when you're not actively cooking or prepping food, stick it in that locker and shut it, so that you are really removing that temptation for these wildlife to become dependent on humans.
Exactly. And yeah, Eric asked, where does perishable food go? Can it be left in the cooler in the campsite? Does it need to be in the car?
I would always lock it in the car. Put your big cooler. I usually leave it. I have a hatchback. And so I usually leave it right at the very, very edge of the hatchback. And so when I've got my car open and I've got the cooler open, I can get that easily access the perishable food. And then as soon as I'm done, I've got the lid down, because I'm trying to keep everything as cool as possible. And again, if you're doing a 2-night camping trip, you're really not going to have a problem. So long as you've got ice or those freezable packs in your cooler and you keep the lid on, you're not going to have a problem with perishable food. Nothing's going to go moldy or off in that time.
Yeah, so I would say, like, if it's like dinner time and you're cooking, you can leave it in your cooler. But if you're like gonna pack up overnight and you're going back into your tent to sleep, I would put things either in your car if there's no locker available, but always use the locker, because if there's bears around, they could definitely get in your car, and you do not want that. So make sure you follow the rules. The campgrounds will clearly list like all food must go in the locker, so just make sure you're aware of that. Otherwise, use your best judgment. We just want to make sure we don't feed the wildlife. Thanks, Jo.
That's not. Okay, so also being a responsible camper is staying on trails, practice leaving no trace, keep your dogs on a leash, as we said, packing away your food, don't feed the animals. Also, one of the things that often comes up is considerations about firewood, because we have all of these microclimates and micro sort of ecosystems in California. And so if you know that you're going to want to make a fire and build a fire in the evening, and that's super enjoyable, we recommend that you buy the firewood. If you can't collect firewood in the campground where you are camping, that you purchase the firewood as close to the campground as you can, because there are all kinds of microorganisms and insects that if you bring firewood, say, from your home, and then you trek it all the way up to the foothills or something like that, you might inadvertently be transporting insects and microorganisms. And another thing that we recommend is that after you've been out and about hiking is that you wash your boots, because again, you've got all of these microorganisms that you are moving around the state. And you might not think that this is like a really critical thing, but again, we just want everyone to be as light on the land as possible, okay? And please don't pick plants, because they're not there to be picked, they're there to be enjoyed and to be homes for wildlife and food sources for wildlife, okay? Anything you want to say about that, Megan?
Yeah, I like to just say, like, instead of considering taking anything, if you're going to take anything, just take pictures. That's the best way to remember the memories and the plants and the animals that you see. But I appreciate the message about being a responsible camper, because, you know, we have a duty to protect these places so as many people can enjoy them for as long as we can without impacting the local wildlife and the environment.
Yeah, I was going to say something about ticks, because you know, ticks are on the move, and the reason why ticks are on the move, we're finding them at altitudes and at latitudes and up higher than they've ever been before. And so, you know, the hypothesis is that is as a result of climate change. But as humans, we want to be limiting our impact in terms of moving these insects and microorganisms around. So anything we can do to really minimize that is really important, okay? Yeah, we want to still take care of all these places that we love. So this, I've just kind of left this up without all of the, you know, buildable slide, because people often talk about, well, what are the kids going to do when, you know, if we're there and once we've got the campground set up and our tents and, you know, we've figured everything out, we're comfortable. One of the things that I really like to talk about is, from my perspective, how much I saw my kids' confidence grew over their ages from probably about 5 to about 12. And when we started out, you know, it was really hard for them to set up tents without help. But by the time they were, you know, 10, 11, 12, they were really good. They could actually take their own tents down, clean them, roll them up, get them stowed. And so all these different activities that you can do around the jobs that are about camping, you know, keeping your tents tidy, leave no trace, fetching the water from the spigot, you know, collecting, bringing firewood to the fire pit, washing up after meals, learning about fire safety, going exploring the campground and kind of like drawing. My kids used to love like drawing little maps of the campground and figuring out, you know, where the bathrooms were and where's the ranger station. In the summertime, most campgrounds, especially the larger ones, they will have programs on offer, especially at the weekends. These are wonderful. And they'll often like have s'mores available for the kids. They'll give out, you know, like photocopied information about animals and birds. You can teach your children how to read a trail map, how to work a coin op. You know, I don't know what combing is. Oh, beach combing. That became a separate bullet. That was a mistake. But there's all these activities that are just involved in being in nature and being at a campground. And then in the evenings, you can just have fun and do your s'mores. If your kids are up for it, you can maybe tell some spooky stories, share stories of when you were a kid, because I just don't think we do that enough. I used to actually love to do talent shows with, when I was a teacher, I'd tell my kids, my school kids, my class, everybody has to come and have a new thing to share at the talent show. And they would just go completely overboard. Some of them even brought costumes and props, and we would just laugh so hard. It was wonderful. And then there's always the good old sing-along. Even if you can't hold a tune, a sing-along is always a great thing to do around the campfire.
That's definitely my favorite part, is singing around the fire.
Yeah. And before you go to bed, check. So anyway, let's really get into that about other critters and keeping your site. Why keeping your site clean, as we mentioned earlier, is so important. Not only packing away your food, but you need to get your trash straight away. As soon as you finish a meal, don't leave your trash like in a paper bag or on the table. You really need to get that packed away and get that in the dumpster there's usually a dumpster, and it's usually located near the ranger station or near the bathrooms. And keep your cooler either in the locked car or in the locked bear locker. Don't ever allow your kids to have food in the tents, because these animals, especially like the raccoons, their sense of smell is extraordinary. And I'll never forget, one year camping with school, one of the kids that I was camping with didn't realize that his mother had packed beef jerky in his backpack. He had no idea, and she'd snuck it in there the day that he left. And we could not figure out why the raccoons kept going to his tent. And in the end, at like 11 o'clock at night, I had the kids empty out every single one of their backpacks. And guess what? We found the beef jerky. So don't ever allow food in your tents. Don't feed the animals. Also, if you see an animal and you feel yourself, having a reaction, kids will model their behavior after yours. So if you react negatively to seeing, a raccoon, or you scream at the jays, or you throw things at the little chipmunks and things like that, your kids are actually going to copy you. So if you try to, I know it's really hard, especially if you see something like a snake or something like that, very, very unusual to do that, by the way. Just try to, keep it in a good sort of range of reaction. And then in terms of safety, if you go out hiking, you should always have your first aid kit and a whistle. And you should never go camping, without a first aid kit, at least in your car. Tick check daily, as we've said before. Yeah, there she is. She's got the first aid kit. I'm going to wave my tick again. There it is. Tick check. And treat your clothes and bare skin with repellents, because that will really help not just keep the ticks away, but any kind of mosquitoes, biting flies, all these kinds of insects that, it's just one of those things. We want you to be comfortable and we want you to be safe. Okay. And
just a little time check, Jo. We got about 6 minutes left.
Oh my gosh.
Don't worry, take your time. We can answer questions, but I want to make sure we have enough time so you can keep going. But
yeah, this was what my concern was. And hats, sunscreen, and very important is hydration. Everybody needs a water bottle. Okay. A quick word about poison oak. Here's an ID, a Technu. You can use it in the shower if exposed, and you can pack anti-itch salve.
Well, let me. It's okay if we go a little over, and folks, you can always catch the recording if you need to leave. But can you go back to the poison oak? I've learned that if it's leaves of 3, let it be, and if it's hairy, it's a berry. Poison oak is usually glistening, as you can see it here. But if it's usually if it's hairy, it's kind of typically a blackberry. But also, if you're unsure, maybe avoid it until you are able to identify it. And there's some helpful apps on the phone that you can download. I like the Seek app. It's called SEEK, and it works without any data. You don't have to have internet online, and you can just identify poison oak. You can identify mushrooms, trees, flowers, plants. So it's a really cool tool. But leaves of 3, let it be.
Yep, there it is. And that's a great photo, actually. All right. So common sense safety, first aid kit, hats, sunscreen, eye protection, water bottles. If you're near water or going kayaking, personal flotation devices. Oftentimes when you rent kayaks, they'll give those to you. Closed-toe shoes. The number of kids I've seen who've come a cropper because they're wearing flip-flops. Not a big fan of flip-flops on camping trips. There's a lot of tripping situations can happen. So if you know you're going to be going out in the water, water shoes are a great thing. And again, insect repellents. All right. And what's the dirt on dirt? Actually, there's a lot of great things about dirt. I'm sure Megan's got lots of things to say about this, but we all really need to be making sure that we are building our immune systems, and we are doing that when we're in contact with dirt. And we know that this can really help with a variety of both like sicknesses, like bacterial infections, viral infection, but also even depression and anxiety. So getting your hands and getting a little bit dirty is a really, really good thing. And these non-infectious organisms that live on our planet, so many of them are actually old friends. They're very old. They kind of, developed way before we did. So it's really good to have those in your microbiome. But common sense stuff. You can hand wash before eating. You can use hand sanitizer. It's not always a fantastic option. I'm a big believer in just soap and water, honestly. And you can collect old washcloths and just keep damp old washcloths in those Ziploc bags are handy to like clean off hands and faces and things like that. Okay. It's not going to kill your kids if they don't shower for 2 nights while you're camping. Full confession, I actually went a whole week one time without showering. And, nobody complained. And I did say to people, let me know if I stink. And it was all good.
Yeah, the way I get around that is if there's like a river or a lake to swim in, that usually refreshes me. And if I'm really feeling not great, I take baby wipes and I can wipe, like my armpits and other areas that are really sweaty.
Exactly.
And also, I like to wash my face with like fresh water that's typically available at the campsite or if we pack it.
Yeah.
So there are little ways that we can do to stay hygienic and clean. But I'd much rather eat something I dropped on the forest floor than a city floor because that's way cleaner. But I appreciate you mentioning the dirt on dirt.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about tick bite prevention. So one of the options that you can do is you can actually treat your clothes, and you could just spray your clothes, your boots, your socks, especially like your pants. Because ticks will actually die on clothing if they're treated with this particular insect repellent. It's called permethrin, and it's harmless to humans, and you can do it for yourself very cheaply. Or if you don't want to do it yourself, you can actually send clothing away to get treated by this organization called Insect Shield. And you can also then need to use repellent on bare skin. You should never use permethrin on bare skin. And what we recommend is that you use a repellent that has more than 20% DEET. And if you want to research this, we recommend that you use really reliable resources when you're researching any kind of alternatives to DEET. Because there are natural repellents out there that are very effective. The thing is that if you're also putting on sunscreen, that can reduce the efficacy of the repellent, and you need to reapply the repellent frequently to your skin if you're using natural repellent. So again, this is the stuff that you put on your clothing, and this is the stuff, the natural repellents with DEET is what goes on your skin. And again, this will give you protection to all those other kinds of insects, not just ticks. If you are unfortunate and you either get a tick on yourself or your kids or your pets or your dog gets a tick, please learn the correct way to remove a tick. You want to grasp it as close to the skin as possible using a needle nose tweezer or a tick removal tool. Don't use the flat-headed tweezers because you might inadvertently snap the head off the tick. Pull firmly and gently away from the skin. Don't twist or yank because you could shock the tick. And in shocking the tick or using alternative methods like putting a lit match under the tick or trying to scrape it off with a credit card or putting, I've even heard people say, oh, I put duct tape on my tick. Don't do any of those things because you could shock the tick and then it could actually regurgitate the entire contents of its midgut into your skin and into your bloodstream. And that's how people get infected. So don't do any of those things. And then you could save the tick for testing because tick testing is a great way to find out whether the tick that bit you was actually infected with something or not. Okay. So practical tips: wear lighter colored clothing if possible. Wear long pants and sleeves. Tuck your pants into your socks. When you get home, you should run your clothing through the dryer before washing, depending if your stuff is completely filthy from having been camping for 2 days. Of course, we understand if you don't want to do this, but if you run them through the dryer, then the heat will desiccate the ticks, so you don't inadvertently bring the ticks into your home. Because 50% of ticks actually survive hot water washes, which is quite shocking to some people. But don't do this if you've been around poison oak, because then you'll have to get a new dryer and you'll be very upset with me. And I don't want to be responsible for that. Okay. Also, it's a great idea to put a little reminder, somewhere in the house. Don't forget to tick check. You can hang up a little tick removal tool. Things like that is a really good thing. Maybe put something in the bathroom by the shower, because when you're in the shower, that's a great place to check for ticks. Check all those nooks and crannies. Okay, and ticks will go anywhere. They'll just look like tiny little dots. And it's remarkable how minuscule they can be, especially the nymphal ticks, which always emerge kind of in the springtime, and they are very hungry and aggressive, and they're just looking for a blood meal. So you need to check yourself and your children thoroughly, and check your pets, because they could be hitchhikers. Anyway, when you leave your campsite, you can assign little jobs to your kids, have a simple no-cook breakfast. Make sure if you have had the fire lit that you drown it 100%. We don't want any more wildfires in California. Typical checkout time is noon. Again, leave no trace. A good thing to do, good practice, is to try to clean the gear as much as you can before you put everything away. Sweep your tent floors, sponge the dirt off your tarps and chairs, and obviously gather trash and take to the dumpsters. And then what I always would do is bag all that dirty laundry. I always have a few extra garbage bags, and just have people put all the dirty laundry in the garbage bags, okay, in just one spot, and then I would know. So
now, real quickly about ticks that you mentioned.
yeah.
I think it's important for folks, if you stay on trail, you'll generally be okay. Ticks are more closely related to spiders, so they're arachnids, so they don't jump. This is what I learned from you, Jo, last time. They don't jump, they crawl. So they crawl when you brush up onto high grass. But if you're typically staying on trails, you're typically going to be okay, but it's always good to check just in case. Yeah. So, but we're just telling you for reminders on prevention. But typically, if you stay on trail, you'll be in the clear. All right, carry on. We're almost through it. And then I have a bunch of questions from the audience that folks are going to ask you.
So I'm not going to dwell on this, because I'm hoping that people will just come to the recording and see all of these links that are available. And I know, Megan, you said you were going to email people later, right?
Yeah, it's also in the description. All these so there's in the description on YouTube, and we'll also email for those folks who register. There's a link to this blog post that has all these recommendations on places where to go, and also the packing list. So Jo, can you go back to your slide there, the last slide? If anyone wants to reach more about Jo, with your email.
Oh, this one.
Yeah, okay, so if anyone wants to reach Jo directly, there is Jo's email. And can I get in the chat just some gratitudes and celebrations for our speaker tonight? Thanks, Jo, for sharing that. Let's do a lightning round of questions from the audience. And then I will share some camping spots and camping packing lists. So let's talk about some questions. Okay, so what do you do when it's high fire season and wood burning is not allowed? And can you talk about some safety tips on how to light a fire and maybe how to put it out as well?
Okay. Well, first of all, I would say that unless you are at extremely high altitude during fire season, you are going to be warm enough and probably are not going to need to light a fire. And so I usually don't really worry too much about that. And, I think the only time that I was ever really cold camping was when I decided to take my kids camping for our birthdays in March. And we went to Big Basin, back when Big Basin was still open. Obviously, this is a long time ago. And it was so cold. And we had to really, have that fire going a lot. But other than that, I would say probably, especially if you're looking at camping in like July, August time, I don't think you're really necessarily going to need a fire. Um, and then the other thing is tips about lighting a fire easily. I always pack newspapers. I always try to gather some sort of kindling type situation, little sticks and twigs and things like that. And you can buy kindling typically as well. And also you can get these bricks. They're called fire starters. And you can actually buy them from Safeway and from grocery stores. And you just put that in the base of the fire pit, pile some newspaper on top, put some kindling, start small, put some bits of kindling, and then as your fire gets going, you gradually add larger and larger and larger logs until your fire is really, really going well.
Yes, and there's also lots of videos online on YouTube to show you how to do that safely. All right, and then we have a few more questions about like camping with babies, either 12 months year old or little ones, like really little ones. What advice do you have?
Yeah, I actually remember camping with my daughter, and she was probably only about, she wasn't walking, so she was maybe about like 9 months old. And, you know, I wasn't terribly worried about the whole like dirt thing. And she just kind of crawled around, and it was warm, so we didn't have a fire. So I wasn't worried about her, getting burned by the fire or anything like that. And I think that just having sort of like a large blanket on a top, so there's a place where you can leave the baby safely, or maybe one of those little bouncy chair things, pack one of those so that the child is actually kind of corralled a little bit. That would be my recommendation, because when you're cooking or food prepping and doing things, you really do need two hands. So you need to have a way of being able to make sure that your small child is kind of safe while you're busy doing other things.
Mm-hmm. And then just last question for now, and then I'll do some slides, and if there's more questions, we can answer them at the end. But Desiree asked if there's any tent recommendations for someone who doesn't want a complicated tent build, and how to use propane, and do you have to put out a fire every night? I mean,
Right.
Can I answer this one real quick? I would say there are tents that you can just, like, they come built. There's just like, it's just like a pop-up, and then it's
Yeah.
like boom, done, like in seconds. So there's lots of options. I would say yes, you 100% need to put out the fire every single night, because we live in California and there's wildfires. And then propane, there's like definitely videos online, but they're pretty simple to use. It's just like a screw in light. And typically if you go to a store like Sports Basement or REI, they can give you a tutorial on how to use them as well. Anything to add on that, Jo?
No, I agree with all those things 100%. And don't be frightened. I mean, you know what? You can just go and just camp for one night, to begin with. And just stay as close to home as possible so that you build your confidence with the situation.
Yeah. Thanks, Jo. So we kept our audience waiting long enough. I want to make sure we talk about sites and where to go. So real quickly, here's a reminder from Post that when we're outside, we want to practice recreating responsibly. And that means respecting nature and wildlife, not bothering them, but just appreciating them, leaving no trace, which means that we don't litter, we pack everything that we brought, and as if we were never there. So we don't impact the natural landscape, and to stay on trails so we don't trample the fragile ecosystem, as well as be welcoming to others who are there to experience nature together. So in terms of locations, here's where Post recommends you can book and that are local. Joseph D. Grant County Park is a place, and we're going to drop a link in the chat where a blog post that lists a lot of tips and tricks, and at the very bottom has all these locations linked. So there is a Joseph D. Grant County Park, which is east of San Jose. Then we have Anthony Chabot Regional Park. I've personally been here, and it's really awesome. And that is near San Leandro, near Castro Valley, in the East Bay. Then we have Portola Redwood State Park. So if you're looking more for like a really forested, like Grand Redwoods Vibe. This is a good place, and that is on the peninsula near Castle Rock State Park.
And
And
there's
west
a
of
beautiful creek there with like a shingle beach, very beautiful. And so if your kids like to paddle and sort of play in the water, that's a wonderful park for that.
Yes, exactly. And then we also have Uvis Canyon County Park, which is a little closer to like Morgan Hill, and more south. But this is also another cool place, and there's running water, going by during the times there is water. And so these are some cool places that you can check out. It's listed in the blog post we just dropped in the chat, and if you're watching the recording, you can click in the YouTube description, and it's there as well. And then if you forgot everything that was happening in the presentation slides, and you're just like, want a one-stop place to just make sure you have all your gear, we created a downloadable and printable checklist where there's a packing list for your kids that you can give to them, and they can pack and check off their items individually as they're packing their own bag. And then there's like a complete camping list where, as the parents or as the adults, the guardians, you can use this list to make sure you have all the essentials as well. And we also have created a sample food menu for a 2 to 3 day trip with super easy to make meals where you can have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and snacks are listed, as well as some extra items like condiments. Sometimes it's easy to remember. I forgot the hot sauce, and it's really, for me, I always need my hot sauce when I'm out there cooking my meals, and or bringing things like salt and pepper if you need that, if you're planning to cook a little bit, things like pasta. So making sure you have these ideas on camping and the items to pack, so you can print that as well. So make sure you check out that blog. But let's see if there's any other questions that came in. Okay, let's take this last question, and then if there's any last announcement that you have, Jo, we can go to you. But let's see. We have a question from the audience. What do you do when you hear animals around your tent at night, like mountain lions? What do you do?
I haven't, in all my years of camping, I've never even seen a mountain lion. In my experience, the animals that you might be most concerned about, like that could be a threat to your life. I mean, honestly, like a bear or a mountain lion or a rattlesnake. I've never come into contact with any of those types of animals in a California state campground. So, the animals that I think are most likely to come into the campgrounds at night are the raccoons. And if you have been vigilant about getting those food items locked away, like I said, then you really should not get bothered by animals at night. And animals are creatures of habit. And I remember one time sitting by the campfire, and it was very dark and the kids were all asleep, and I saw a skunk literally just coming through the campground, and he was minding his own business, and he walked straight through the campground, and I thought, oh my gosh, through the campsite. And the next night, at exactly the same time, 9:10, he did the same thing again. And I just thought, yeah, this is his home. As long as I didn't react and I didn't, make a fuss, he was not going to bother me, and I was not going to bother him.
Yeah, it's typically, if you stay in trails and like crowded areas, you'll typically be okay. And there's lots of videos online that tell you what to do, but in general, you'll typically, if you're staying in the crowded areas, you'll be all right. But I think the tip for mountain lions is you want to make yourself really big. So hopefully they leave you alone. But I've never seen one either, and I hope I don't get to see one. But yeah, thanks, Jo. I appreciate you for being here tonight. There's so much love for you in the chat here. Really appreciate everybody sticking by. And if you want to learn more about Jo and what the Bay Area Lyme Foundation does, check out their website below here that we're going to flash on the screen in a sec. So we'll make sure the blog we'll repost the blog list. It's also in the YouTube description. So I see folks in the chat having trouble finding it, but make sure you can find it in the description. Jo, let's take a group picture before you leave. We'll smile,
sure.
and then we'll take a screen capture for that later. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. And how about one with our binoculars?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Nice. All right, Jo, we're going to say goodbye to you. And then for now. But wait, folks, don't go anywhere. I want to give you some announcement on some awesome events that we have coming up. We hope to join you at our free community event that's going to inspire. The Wild and Scenic Film Festival is back, featuring award-winning environmental and adventure films, plus the chance to win some amazing raffle prizes. And this event is going to be both in person and virtual, so you can sign up for whatever fits your schedule the best. Don't miss out and register now to secure your spot. Tickets are free. We're giving out free pizzas. There's going to be falconers there with birds like owls and hawks. We're giving out raffle prizes, like I mentioned, and there's going to be at least over 20 community booth partners that are there talking about the resources that they have in the community. So register for that. If you are new to Post Work, we have so many free events every month. We're talking hikes, walks, in-person and online events, volunteer work days, and so much more. So make sure you check out our website to learn more about that. And we also post so many free field guides. So if you have a dog and you're looking for dog-friendly hikes, or you want to catch the wildflowers this spring, or if you're just curious on where to go hiking on the coast, or if you have a bike, you want to go bike riding, we tell you exactly where to go. So make sure you go to our website, openspacetrust.org/field guides, or you can scan that QR code on the screen. And then lastly, if you like tonight's event, let us know. We really appreciate your feedback. It'll help us make sure we give you quality content every single time. Feel free to discuss new topics. What do you want to hear? I'm so glad you can spend your evening with us tonight. Once again, it's been a pleasure hosting you. My name is Megan, and I wish you all good night. Thank you all. Scan that code, fill out that survey. You can click the link in the chat to also fill it out there. We'll also email it to you. You'll get all the resources that we talked about and in your emails in the event description. But wish you all good night. Fill out that survey. Thanks, y'all.